We'll begin to move forward with our program this evening. Thank you for being here tonight. One of the reasons that I hate to stop the visiting, the vigorous interaction amongst you, is because we want to respect your time and we want to be efficient with our time tonight, and we are committed to trying to dismiss in an hour. Now, in case I forget to say it when we finish, there are probably more hors d'oeuvres downstairs, and if there are, please take a moment and enjoy them on the way out. We've paid for them one way or another, so enjoy them on your way out. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Cambridge School of Dallas 2020 Faith and Culture Evening. For those of you whom I have not had the privilege of meeting, my name is Paul Wolf, and I have the honor and privilege of serving, well, what many people call Dallas's best kept secret, the Cambridge School of Dallas, and I get to serve as head of school. And what an honor it is to do so, to serve a community like this. And for those of you who don't know too much about us, I think you will appreciate what you see, what you hear, what you understand and perceive tonight. You honor us by being here, so thank you. And even all of those of you whom I do know and who are friends and family of the school, thank you for being with us. You could be many other places doing many other things, and yet you have chosen to be here, and we are grateful. Thank you for that. As a Christ-centered classical college preparatory school, we as a school are regularly confronted with questions that revolve around the interface of Christian faith and culture. There are various ways in which these questions and the dilemmas caused by those questions in some cases, there are various ways in which we encounter them, various ways in which that wrestling with that interface rises to the surface and manifests itself in our school year by year. Some of the times you actually see that in what the students are doing. Now, I'm not talking about in classes. That's a different set of issues, although it fits everything I'm saying. But I'm talking about other things. For example, our 5th grade through juniors just recently concluded their annual declamation. That is a full event that lasts several months in which they memorize an important piece of literature, political speech, scripture, something like that. They memorize it, and then they perform it. And we choose the top ones, they do it again, then we choose the top ones, and they do it again in an evening event like this, on stage, publicly. And then we award, they do that in front of a panel of judges, by the way. The last evening, it's, of course, in front of judges who are not from our school. And then we award prizes for those who have done an outstanding job in the judge's eyes that year. That's one way the students do it. The other way is our seniors coming up. And if you will look at your program on the back side on upcoming public events, you will see that soon you will be able to attend the senior tutorial finals. That's one of the most distinctive academic aspects of our school. And if you haven't attended one of those, I strongly encourage you to come to the senior tutorial finals that evening. They're wrestling with serious questions and presenting a thesis, and then they present it publicly and defend it publicly in an event something like tonight. And then, of course, with the faculty, in addition to many other things, they deliver a couple of lectures a year. One of those is coming up. That's also noted there on the back of your program. And then in lots of other ways, publications and presentations at professional conferences and just in the hallways, with one another and with students. Tonight, we are honored to have a guest come in and think with us and share insights from his own journey about that relationship between faith and culture. In fact, I would say we have an old friend with us. Now, until this week, most of us had probably never met him personally. But because we welcomed him into our home from time to time, if you're like me, very regularly, you would think he's an old friend. But even though I just met him this week, we picked up the conversation, John, didn't we? Right where we left off last time, right?
That's true.
That kind of a fellow. And I thoroughly enjoyed that. John McCaa is with us tonight. John is married to Nora. In fact, next week, they will celebrate their 21st wedding anniversary. And so, congratulations, John, on that. John has a son, a daughter-in-law, and now a 10-month-old granddaughter. That's a fraternity that I was thrilled to be a part of, and I'll bet you are as well. So congratulations on that. John holds a bachelor's degree in journalism and mass communications from Creighton University, a Jesuit university in Nebraska, where John lived for many years. He holds a master's degree in politics from the University of Dallas. And he topped all of that off with a PhD in humanities and the history of ideas from the University of Texas at Dallas. That's one of the things that caught my attention when I first discovered your profile. A PhD in history of ideas. I need to get to know this fellow. So here we are, John. After several years in TV news journalism in Nebraska and then in Fort Worth, in 1992, John became co-anchor at WFAA Channel 8, the local affiliate of ABC News, a position he then went on to hold for 27 years. That's why he feels like an old friend. John McCaa is a man of deep integrity, so much so that even those who disagree deeply with him about life and faith, well, even they have nothing but high praise for him. As a matter of fact, why don't we listen to one of his former colleagues say it himself?
I've known John McCaa longer than any of you watching tonight. We both worked in Omaha in the late 70s. He was at the best TV station in town. I was at another one. But I was a fan of his work then and been a fan of his work ever since. John is not the guy who will tell you about what he has meant to the station, what he has meant to the TV viewers in North Texas, so I'm going to do it for him. He's not always happy about all the happy talk we do, because he knows how important the job really is. He reports the facts, he tells the truth, and he exposes the lies. Do we make mistakes? Of course we do. But anyone who confuses the occasional media mistake with media bias is as dumb as someone who would confuse today's weather with climate. John McCaa has been the conscience of this newscast for more than 20 years now. He broke the color barrier that had existed for too long in Dallas-Fort Worth television. There had been women of color who took their spot at the anchor desk, but John was the first man of color to have that job. There were whispers in our newsroom by people who are no longer here, incidentally, that he was being promoted to that job only because of the color of his skin. He has proved those critics wrong. He's not the only man of color to anchor in Dallas, but he was the first. He has done it longer, and he has done it better than anyone since. And he has inspired a generation of young men that they too can have big dreams, because big dreams are possible now. John McCaa is a credit to his profession, and he is a credit to his race, the human race.
to give thanks for this evening and also for an old friend. Join me in prayer. Indeed, our good Father, thank you for your grace, your presence, the hope that you bring and that you give to us. And for examples that we can find things in to imitate. I sense that John McCaa is one of those examples. So thank you for allowing our paths to cross with his. May this evening be a time in which we are encouraged, inspired, and go away uplifted to follow a life and pursue a life worth living, committed to virtue, which will ultimately imitate you also. And it is in your honor, to your honor, in the name of your Son and by your Spirit that we pray. Amen. Please join me once again in welcoming John McCaa.
Doctor, thank you very much. How is everybody, all right? How is everybody, all right? Oh, my. I may get a little confusing because I've got a lot of slides that I'm going to show you. And even though when you anchor the news, there's usually someone else who runs the slides. So I may get a little confused in all this. I hope that I don't. But we all shall see. I want to thank you very much for the very kind introduction. It is good for me to be back in Dallas among friends. Let's see what we have here. And that's what I'm going to be talking about, toward a life worth living. Good to be back in Dallas among friends. Nora and I are enjoying our retirement, believe it or not. Take a look. That's my lovely bride. We live now in Edinburgh, which is in South Texas. We're just a stone's throw from the border. After years of living away from her mother and father, we are now just minutes from their home, which is in neighboring McAllen. Don't worry about the shoes. It's just... My father is 89 years old. He lives in Colorado Springs. And technically, he is retired, but still on occasion he drives to Albuquerque, New Mexico to work on a research project with others at the University of New Mexico. He's still very healthy. He is retired from the Air Force and from being the personnel director at a Colorado Springs school district. And he still does 90 minutes of military exercises 6 days a week, the same that he's been doing since I was in junior high school. And as a result, he still has a 29-inch waist and can probably do more push-ups than most of the people in this room. For me, retirement has meant every day is Saturday. Much slower pace. There's no more late nights, getting home at around 11:15 at night, energized and unable to fall asleep until 1:30 or 2 in the morning. Now, we rarely watch the 10 o'clock news because, well, we're actually in bed at 9 o'clock. But we are up earlier, 5:30 in the morning. In fact, I have taken up my father's exercise regimen. Unfortunately, was still nowhere near the same intensity, and as you can see, nowhere near the same results. But I'm getting there. Tonight, I'm going to talk about my family. I rarely did that when I was in the news, but I think that it's important, since we're talking about faith and culture, for me to talk about those who've had such an influence on me. And tonight, I want to make sure that I impart the right message using the right words. You see, I'm thinking of the Illinois man who left the icy cold streets of Chicago just a few weeks ago. He was going to go on vacation in sunny Florida. His wife was on a business trip, and the plan was for her to join him in Florida the very next day. So when the husband got to his hotel, he decided he was going to send her a very quick email. He had misplaced the scrap of paper on which he had written her email address, so he did his best to type it from memory, and like many of us do, he missed one letter. So his email went to an elderly preacher's wife whose husband had passed away only the day before. Now, when she checked her email, she took one look at the computer screen, she let out a loud scream, and then she fell to the floor dead. At the sound, her family rushed into the room, and on the screen, they saw a note that said, "Dearest wife, just got checked in. Everything prepared for your arrival tomorrow. Your loving husband. P.S. It sure is hot out here." So you see, the wrong message delivered or the wrong words, that's something that I really want to avoid tonight. Education has always been fundamental in our family. My mother passed away in 2007. She was a homemaker who made very clear to my sister and to me the importance of learning. When you came home from school, you did your homework first. You didn't watch TV, you didn't listen to music. Your homework came first. And once that was completed, you could do what you wanted. And in fact, she would check your homework. And if she didn't understand it, she would check to make sure that at least it was neat. Both of my parents stressed academics, but they were more concerned about whether my sister, whether we were developing a sense of moral virtue. Did we believe in something that was greater than ourselves? Did we conduct ourselves in a truthful, upright fashion? It was not enough in our family to have good grades. Did you arrive at those high marks in an honorable fashion? A lot of young people today, then and now, worry about getting into trouble with the teacher or the principal or even the police. I worried about getting in trouble with my folks because I knew that would be problems, or engaging in some activity that might bring shame to my family. Because a lot of people that you hear about today, people who had a troubled childhood or who had terrible parents, I was fortunate. Now, the word really should be, the proper word is blessed with two wonderful, God-fearing parents who were strict, yes, who were old-fashioned, absolutely. Parents who explained that there are many ideas in the world, but not all ideas are equal. Parents who believed in a higher law beyond anything made by society. Parents who truly believed in leading by example, who held that each of us should stand for something in which we believed and then display it in how we carry ourselves. Every Sunday we were in church and Sunday school, and for my folks it was not just a show for the outside world or a place to be seen at 11 o'clock on the Sabbath. Your faith was something that you lived every day. Now, a confession. Me, I was not always an angel at school. I've met some of the students today. You have fabulous young people asking some terrific questions. But in the second, third, and fourth grades, me, for the first 9 weeks, I would get into trouble for talking in class. Visiting is what they used to call it, visiting during periods when I should have been working. And I want you to notice that I said during the first 9 weeks, not the entire school year, because that 9-week marker directly corresponded with when the first report card went home. Or in some cases, the first parent-teacher conference took place. And when it did, and my parents discovered that I would be getting an N for needs to improve under the section entitled Deportment, it resulted in my father doing a little private visiting with me behind closed doors that night. And then following that encounter, the very next school day, an immediate transformation in my classroom conduct would take place. And suddenly I was always paying attention and always quiet in class, except when called upon, of course. And then lo and behold, that N was miraculously changed into the letter O for outstanding. I can remember my second, third, and fourth grade teachers, Mrs. Bartholomew, Mrs. Dietz, Ms. McMiniman, all calling my parents a week after that first report card went home and saying, "My word, what did you do? He's such a different child now. He's so quiet. He's so attentive." And I remember my mother saying with absolute confidence, and I can assure you, that's exactly what you're going to be seeing from him for the rest of the school year. I had strayed temporarily from the expectation that my folks had that I would follow their example. My parents didn't do that. They didn't behave that way. Their parents didn't behave that way. They did not expect that from me. It ran contrary to something that they had always taught. It was a teaching method by which they had always lived. Young people need good advice, but what they need even more than that are good examples. By way of further illustration, a couple of young boys were engaged in a loud, heated argument in the classroom when the teacher entered the room and asked, "Why are you arguing?" And the boys said, "Well, look, we found this $10 bill, and we decided that the one who tells the biggest lie, that person should have it." And the teacher was outraged. He said, "I can't believe you, young man. You should be ashamed of yourself." He said, "When I was your age, I had no idea what a lie was." So the boys looked at each other and they gave the teacher the $10 bill. Young people need good advice, but what they need more than that are good examples. It is very good to see so many gathered tonight, parents, teachers, administrators, students, concerned citizens, united to promote what I believe is the proper education of our young people. Parents, you're to be commended for your dedication to providing such a special education for your children. You Cambridge supporters, you too deserve a pat on the back for your contributions to making sure that tomorrow's servant leaders are steeped, and I mean steeped, in a classical, Christ-centered education. Since 2013, graduates have gone on to some of America's premier universities to continue their studies. Take a look at this. Oh, I must have gotten off there somewhere. That's my parents. That's your school. That's my family. That's that. Aha! Back where I'm supposed to be. Among the schools they've gone to, Georgetown University, Hillsdale University. How many of you have heard of Hillsdale? An amazing school. Santa Clara, Notre Dame, the service academies. And they've entered some of the honors colleges within many of the U.S. largest schools. But what is it that constitutes a proper education? What is it that every parent, every interested loved one prays to see in a young person who's coming out of high school? For that matter, why does every CSD student put in the extra hours, engage in the extended research to make sure that their senior tutorial is not just a recitation of facts and numbers they regurgitate before a board of professors at presentation, but is an in-depth reflection of a clear understanding of their place in the world, their creator, and the relationship between the two of them? I agreed to speak tonight because I believe CSD has something in common with my parents and their teachings, an insistence that God is sovereign, that Jesus is his Son and our Redeemer. The insistence of leading by example, and a conviction that a proper education is much more than the accumulation of knowledge. This is a photograph of my father's graduating class for his master's degree, which he got from the University of Southern California while he was still in the military. It's not really too hard to figure out which one he is in there. I still cannot imagine how difficult that must have been for him, for my mother to have a family, to raise two kids, to work in the military, and on occasion, when stationed stateside, hold a second job, all while still working to get his master's degree, his bachelor's degree. I am sure that there were times that my father and my mother just wanted to give up. But there is a steadfastness that develops from a pursuit of moral virtue that removes giving up as an option. I'm old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 60s, and for those of you who have forgotten, the Soviet Union, at the request of Fidel Castro, had begun to assemble medium and intermediate range ballistic missiles that were tipped with nuclear bombs on the island of Cuba. We were living in Nebraska at Offutt Air Force Base, which at the time was the headquarters of what was called the Strategic Air Command. This man was in charge of it. He's called the SINCSAC, the Commander-in-Chief Strategic Air Command. His name is Thomas S. Power. And in those days, rain or shine, If you drove by his house, which was in the middle of the base, if you drove by his house, there was always a guard at the front door with a loaded pearl-handled revolver and wearing a blue beret. And for the younger people in the audience, SAC, as it was called, was the place. This is why he's so important. It was the place where the target of every nuclear weapon in the American arsenal was selected. And should we go to war, those targets were forwarded to the president and to others for their determination on whether or how we should respond. The official name of that constantly changing plan was called the SIOP, the Single Integrated Operational Plan. There was a time when even that word was a secret. My father worked in that building where it was developed. We lived perhaps 4 or 5 miles away. So at the time I was in, I think, the 2nd grade, and I didn't know the specifics of the danger of the crisis, but like any children, we did sense that there was tension in the air by looking at the adults who were all around us. But I also figured, heck, we live in Nebraska. We are in the middle of nowhere, so surely this is not going to involve us. I can also remember living in Spain just 13 months later and hearing, it was night there because Spain is, I think, 7 hours ahead of us, hearing that President Kennedy had been killed and seeing my father and all the other members of the military on that base just outside Madrid rushing to their jobs because for a moment there was concern that this might be part of some kind of attack. I tell you those stories of those very tense times because that is a period during which my father was in the military, in the Strategic Air Command, with my mother raising 2 children, sometimes working extra hours, all while working on advancing his education beyond what he received in the small Alabama town where he grew up. And in the case of Spain, living in a country that was at that time still controlled by the last remaining fascist dictator of Western Europe, Francisco Franco. And this is also the period during which black folk across America were struggling for equal treatment, equal access, equal opportunity. Certainly gains had been made, no question. The American military, which was segregated when my father graduated from high school in 1946, was integrated by Harry Truman, and by the time I came around, there were many advancements. But in the months between the Cuban Missile Crisis and the death of President Kennedy, the governor of Alabama, my dad's home state and the place where his parents still lived, that governor promised cheering crowds that his state's premier university would never integrate. Peaceful demonstrators and freedom riders were beaten, some were often killed, and their killers were rarely held accountable. Still, with a sense of moral virtue, they continued their efforts. And I point out that it was not just black folk who were murdered. Viola Liuzzo was a housewife from Detroit, mother of 5, whose belief in moral virtue told her that this country should live up to its creed that all men, all women are created equal. But when she left home to volunteer in that struggle in 1965, she was gunned down in her own car. So it was not an easy time in America. Tension across this country was high. People think it's high now. This is nothing compared to then. A generation earlier, my mother's family left Huntington, Tennessee, and they moved to Champaign, Illinois to escape the lack of opportunity in the Jim Crow South. Now, how difficult that must have been for my father, for my mother to create for my sister and for me an environment encouraging us to look to tomorrow. But from both of my parents, the exercise of moral virtue means that you can never, ever, ever let obstacles impede your dreams. You cannot give up. And you cannot make the mistake that some people make of sitting and waiting on the path that has the fewest obstacles, or absolutely no obstacles. Because the honest truth is, just about any path without obstacles is probably not going to take you anywhere. One of my mother's brothers used to tell all of my cousins, wishing for something is not enough. He would say, hold out your hands. Now, I need to make sure that I get this right. He would say, hold out your hands. And he would say, if you wish in one hand and spit in the other, which one fills up faster? And we say, well, Uncle Marshall, the one with the spit in it. He says, exactly. That's because a wish is not worth spit until work and determination comes with it. Now, one of my other uncles had a different consonant in that word when he would explain it to it, but that was how my Uncle Marshall explained it. Everybody has the will to win. What few people have is the will to prepare, the will to get up earlier than everybody, to study longer than anybody, to work harder than anybody, to dedicate yourself to something with such intensity that when you see an obstacle, you climb over it, you walk around it, or simply endure and outlast it. So the question is, as individuals, as a society, where do we find what it takes to overcome those obstacles, to persevere in the face of those hardships? And it really doesn't matter. Listen to this closely. It really doesn't matter who you are, how much you pray, how powerful you are. Those obstacles, those hard times are going to come, and come at a time that might seem to be the worst possible moment. That is Franklin Pierce. He's the 14th President of the United States. I want you to take a very good look at him. He looks like a president, doesn't he? He was elected in 1852. He was an exceptional orator, speaker of his state's legislature by the time he was 26 years old. In Washington, D.C., he served in the House and the Senate before being elected president. Now, Pierce and his wife Jane had 3 children, all boys, but 2 of them had died earlier in life. So Jane Pierce did all that she could to protect their remaining child, Benjamin, or Benny, from any sickness or any harm. After Franklin Pierce was elected, but 2 months before he took office, the family was on board a train that derailed in Massachusetts, and the only fatality in that accident was 11-year-old Benny Pierce. Some say that Pierces believed that Benny's death was the price that God exacted for Franklin being elected the president. And reportedly, for that reason, an angry Franklin Pierce refused to use a Bible when he took the oath of office. Jane Pierce remained grief-stricken for the rest of her life. So tough times, challenges will come to anybody and everybody. Or maybe you're a student. You've worked hard, you've gotten the right grade, you've stayed out of any kind of trouble, and suddenly one of your friends asks you to hang out just for one night. Yeah, it's the wrong place, but it's only for one drink. Then on the way home, you're pulled over for a taillight being out, and the officer smells alcohol. Maybe you're an adult, you've got the perfect job, demonstrably help your company to do well. But once again, the boss looks in a different direction for the promotion that you should have gotten. Whatever the setback, any of us would be shaken to look and looking for advice. The truth is, advice is easy to find in our world today. The experts abound. If you want to look younger, by the way, that's my brand new granddaughter there on the far left. If you want to look younger, there's experts for that. If you want to lose weight, there's experts for that. If you want to be popular, well, imitate the Kardashians. And they've all got lots of takers because all people are born searching. They're all looking for truth. They're all seeking fulfillment. Some think they found it in drugs, some in sex, some in money, some in getting into a big, well-known university where they can acquire the latest knowledge from the smartest people. There are many ideas on this planet. But again, not all ideas are equal. The pursuit of knowledge is not the same as the pursuit of wisdom. And by knowledge, what I mean is facts or information or skills that you gain through experience or education. Some define it as the theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. But however you're going to define it, that is not necessarily wisdom. And it is the pursuit of wisdom, of a life of moral virtue that my parents insisted that you need to get through life. Is experience the best teacher? Because we hear that a lot. Experience is absolutely the best teacher. No, I don't think so. I think observation might be a better teacher. You see, if experience is the best teacher, then you need to experience drugs to understand their benefit or true impact. If experience is the best teacher, you've got to get drunk to fully comprehend the dangers of alcohol. If experience is the best teacher, you must engage in sexual immorality to understand its dangers. But If observation is the better teacher, all you have to do is to look at those around you who thought experience was the way to go. The people who thought that drugs were the answer. And now, if they survive, are learning the dangers of heroin and K2 and all the other illegal substances. Or the binge drinkers who believed fulfillment came in a bottle, or preferably more than one bottle. Or the people who, seeking fulfillment in physical intimacy, instead contracted a disease or found themselves seduced and abandoned by someone they loved who they thought loved them. The truth is, all people are born seeking truth. But again, all ideas about truth, about moral virtue, are not equal. In our society, I may have gotten off again. In our society, we believe that if you make enough money, here we go, if we make enough money, if we have just enough income, then it's perfect. Story about me. When I got into television, I earned $187.50 a week before taxes. That was my first job. Look at that hair. That's my second day in television. $187.50 a week in Omaha, Nebraska. This is November 1976, November 16th, 1976. And now it is true that things were much less expensive in those days. My one-bedroom apartment cost me $167.50 a month, all bills paid. My car note was $102.97 a month. My car insurance was $109 a month. I didn't have cable. There was no internet in those days. There were no cell phones in those days. But it really didn't leave much for gas or for food or for telephone. But still, I can remember my fellow graduates who were just as broke as I was telling me, hey, let's go to the club tonight. We'll pool our money for gas. $4. Now, that doesn't sound like much now, but $4 in those days could probably get you 9 or 10 gallons of gasoline. Everybody gets one drink, we said. All this on $187.50 a week, just barely making it. And I can remember thinking, if only I could make $375 a week. And for you math whizzes, that's $19,500 a year. If only I could make $375 a week, I could live like a king. You change rather quickly the older you get. I want to stop for a moment and address something that I think the students in the room probably feel on the inside, but they're not very likely to share. It is true that I lived with my folks for more than 6 months when I got out of college. I could have lived with them longer, saved up some money. They encouraged me to do that. I love my parents, but I was ready to get out of the house. Look, my parents, they're really good people, but students, now you're in middle and high school now, and you're already feeling a little bit about what I'm about to talk about. Your parents are constantly on you, right? Right? I mean, don't you hear things like, why don't you clean up your room? Your room is always, the students are like, your room is always so messy. Or how about this? Do you know how lucky you are? When I was your age, I walked 10 miles to school in the snow, both ways. Or how about this one? As long as you live in this house, in my house, and put your feet under mine. Does that sound familiar, students? Oh, yeah. And I admit that I said the same thing to my son. My sister and I, we had chores, we had responsibilities, we had rules in our home. It was very old-fashioned. We did not call adults by their first name. It was always yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. If you didn't hear what my parents said to you, you did not say what? You said pardon or sir or ma'am. My father never raised his voice. In fact, if he was not happy with you, he would lower his voice and say, I thought I asked you to cut the grass. And that was enough to make me, oh, okay, let me go. My mother, on the other hand, she could be a screamer, and she thought that it was important for her to regularly remind us just who was in charge of the house. Interesting story. In the 7th grade, I came home one day and made the foolish mistake of asking my mother, I don't understand why we can't run the house like a democracy. I mean, We're Americans. We live in a republic, and all these politicians, by the way, quickly, all these politicians keep telling you that we live in a democracy. We live in a republic, not a democracy. We live in a republic, and there is a distinct difference, which as you go through Cambridge, you will learn. But I said, we should run the house like a democracy. We're Americans in a republic. We believe in a democracy. Shouldn't that be what we practice here in the house? Well, what a mistake that was. For once, she did not raise her voice. She just smiled, and she walked over to the living room curtains, and she threw them open. This is 1967. She threw those curtains open, and she looked at me, and she smiled, and she said, "You see all that out there?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Lyndon Baines Johnson runs all that out there, but inside this house, I am the President of the United States. If Lyndon Johnson himself walks through that front door and wants a glass of water, he had better ask me before he reaches to that cabinet for a glass. Do you hear me?" "Yes, ma'am." She said, "So if the President of the United States has to ask me for a drink of water in this house, how much power do you think you've got around here?" "This is a kingdom," she said. "Almighty God gave it to your father and to me. You and your sister, you're subjects. Until, of course, you go out and create your own kingdom. You got that?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she finished up with this one. She said, "You don't run anything around this house but your mouth. And right now, you're not doing a very good job of that." That was in the 7th grade. So for all of you students, imagine how tough that would be to go away to college for 4 years, graduate, and then come home and have to live with your folks and hear the same thing. So I was ready to leave home, and I am sure they were ready for me to leave as well. Knowledge or experience taught me that if I really did want to live by my own rules, I needed my own apartment. So 2 months after I started working, I got that apartment. And 2 seconds after I got that apartment, it became clear to me that such decisions should not be based on experience or knowledge, but observation and wisdom. If I had been observing my fellow graduates while still living in the comfort of my folks' home, I would have noticed that they were always at our house on Sundays about dinner time. I would have noticed that they were still doing laundry in their own parents' house. Knowledge is important, but wisdom is necessary. Wisdom, which Cicero in 44 BC characterized as the ability to discriminate between good and evil. One of my favorite books of all times is Plutarch's Parallel Lives of the Noble Greeks and Romans. It's a series of biographies. It's written about around the 2nd century AD. It's not so much history as it really is character studies. In the book, Plutarch looks at some of the most celebrated Romans and Greeks of the past. He compares, for example, Julius Caesar to Alexander the Great, Cicero to Demosthenes. He focuses not just on their strengths, but also their failings, hoping to identify any virtues that they may have in common, and in so doing explain for his readers the character traits that you need to copy and those that you need to avoid in life. Moral virtue was what Plutarch was pursuing in his work, using some of the most well-known figures from 2 of the world's most renowned civilizations to find the ethical values that are necessary to conduct a life worth remembering. For a time, Plutarch's Lives was, for much of the Christian world, a key source of wisdom, of discerning right and wrong. In fact, some have argued that only the Bible was more widely quoted during the era of the American founding. And yet today, most students have never heard of Plutarch's Lives, and many teachers have never read it. It is the pursuit of wisdom, of moral virtue, that should be the goal of a proper education. Not so much the battle tactics of Caesar or the oratorical flair of Cicero, that they are important, but the ideas, the concepts of Socrates and his student Plato, how they might have changed over time. Thrasymachus' idea of justice and how it relates to us. C.S. Lewis' explanation of a universal moral law, exploring whether God is, as some non-believers will tell you, a moral monster. But at the core of it all, we should strive, I think, to share the real wisdom to which we now have access to the life, the death, the resurrection of the Christ. Cicero was partially correct. Wisdom is the ability to discriminate between good and evil. But about 100 years after Cicero wrote that, James, the brother of Jesus, James, the brother of Jesus, whose epistle, along with Proverbs, has been a focus of study this year at the Cambridge School, he gave us what I think is a clear and distinct description of a life of wisdom, as clear as you can possibly get. Real wisdom, he said, God's wisdom begins with a holy life and is characterized by getting along with others. It is gentle and reasonable. It is overflowing with mercy and blessings, not hot one day and cold the next, not two-faced. He explained in the same passage this: live well, live wisely, live humbly. It's the way you live, not the way you talk, that counts. James fully understood that not all ideas are equal. His goal in sharing his brother's message was to equip all of us with the wisdom to face the storms of life that we know will come as our lives unfold. You all know that Dallas witnessed one such storm firsthand last October 20th. In just a matter of seconds, a tornado raked a section of the city, damaged homes, destroyed businesses. Even the Cambridge campus was not spared. For those who pursue moral virtue, though shaken by such a violent act of nature, it represented the need for a commitment to each other, to, most importantly, to commit yourself to a Savior who taught in that same book of James that life can have its setbacks, but that there is a way that they should be understood. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. You see, moral virtue builds men and women who do not break at the first obstacle that they encounter. It helps develop young people who understand they will need an inner faith to get where they're headed, a belief in something more than themselves, a means of identifying and leaning on examples, on people who have withstood the test of time. And what greater example is there than Christ Jesus, who through his life, his death, his resurrection taught each of us what my parents reemphasized to me, that the pursuit of moral virtue isn't everything. It is the only thing. It is all that matters, and it is all that is necessary to have a truly successful life. What better way to provide that example of moral virtue than following the only individual to have walked this earth sinless, to die a criminal's death? Most people have forgotten that. To die on the cross is a criminal's death. To die a criminal's death so that the rest of us, sin-filled, might have a chance at eternal life. We worship Christ not just because he provides good advice, but because he set a good example. And not just for our children, for all of us. And I want to emphasize, we do not just honor Christ or admire Christ. We worship Christ because he alone among men and women set the standard of how we should live. He alone allows a perfect God to understand imperfect humans, and imperfect humans access to a perfect God. I want to make no mistake here. A rigorous regimen of academics is fundamental to a proper and complete education. But the true goal must be to send out to the world young men, young women who are more than intellectual automatons. We should want them to be knowledgeable but wise, like St. Augustine, aware of the world around them and their own sin, but not permanently seduced by it. And not so much full of advice, but living examples to others of the love and the mercy of an incomparable wisdom of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Years ago, I lived in Arlington, and there was a sign on a church just down the street. And it said simply, "Why not try God? Don't worry, if it doesn't work out, the devil will always take you back." There are many ideas in the world today, but not all those ideas are equal. I want to say goodnight to you with an old poem, the author of which I do not know, but the wisdom within it I hope we all will embrace. I was shocked confused, bewildered as I entered heaven's door, not by all the beauty, the lights or its decor, but it was the folks I saw in heaven who made me sputter, groan, and gasp. The thieves, the liars, sinners, the alcoholics, and the trash. There stood the kid from 7th grade who stole my lunch money from me twice, and next to him my mean old neighbor who never once said something nice. And her, whom I always thought was rotting away in hell, was sitting pretty on cloud 9, looking incredibly well. And I nudged Jesus and said, "What's the deal? I'd love to hear your take. How'd all these sinners get up here? God must have made a mistake. And why is everyone so quiet, so somber? You got a clue?" "Oh, hush, my child," said he. "It's just shock. They never thought they'd be seeing you." We are, all of us, saved by grace. Let us do all we can to assure our children of the very same opportunity. I want to thank you very much. I want you to continue all that you're doing at school. I met with the students today. You're just phenomenal. That you're learning I was in a pre-calculus class. Man, it hurt my head just to look at the numbers. Then we went to a philosophy class, and we were talking about Aristotle. And it was so wonderful to hear students understand some of the subtle and nuanced differences in people. But keep up the great work. Do not ever let anyone let you think that, for example, there is a separation between, I think we talked about this earlier in one of the classes, theology and math. There is only one truth. The world will tell you there is more than one truth. There is only one truth. And math today is really only defines for you the limits of what we know today about numbers. It will change in 50 years. It will change in 500 years. But Christ will never change. And if you trust Him, He will always be there for you. Thank you very much. I wish you all the very best. No, thank you.
Please have a seat.
No. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. That reception and applause by them, I'm confident, while it's for your words, your testimony, sharing insights from your own journey, it's also for a life well lived in a very difficult environment. So thank you. And thank you for being a new friend to the Cambridge School of Dallas. We are very, very honored now to call you that. And we hope our paths cross again. Now, thank you all for being here. We have 2 other matters to take care of now, if you will allow me. First off is something new. And it is such an honor and a privilege to bring this to you tonight. Tonight, we have the distinct joy and honor of announcing the first Cambridge Lucarane Partners Scholars. This new venture has been established to recognize and support outstanding achievement, character, and leadership by select graduating students from West Dallas Community School and Providence Christian School of Texas. Students who then, after graduating from those 2 schools, matriculate here to the Cambridge School of Dallas. As well as, it's not just about supporting those particular students, those individual students, but it's also established to support the classical Christian education of all 3 of these schools. This is a brand new venture this year. We've had multiple applicants from both schools, and the committee decisions to finalize the selections for these scholarships were very, very challenging. Faculty you probably haven't even heard of this, because this development is very, very new. I don't think we've had a faculty meeting since this began and since this was established. And so tonight, I am honored to present two of what we hope will be this year's 3 inaugural Luke-Rain Partners Scholars at the Cambridge School of Dallas. 2. One tonight on the basis of academic merit, and the other on the basis of character and leadership. On the basis of his academic merit at West Dallas Community School, from which he will graduate at the end of this school year, we are thrilled to recognize an inaugural recipient of a Luke-Rain Partners Scholar and scholarship of nearly full tuition for the next 4 years to the Cambridge School of Dallas. Isaiah Soriano. Please congratulate him. I'm just getting to know Isaiah a fair bit, and it's an honor and a joy to know Isaiah and to learn of his good work at West Dallas Community School. And I'll have something to say about that more in just a moment, okay? All right, that's one. Number 2, on the basis of character and leadership at Providence Christian School of Texas, from which he will graduate at the end of this school year, we are thrilled to recognize as a second inaugural recipient of a Luke-Rain Partners Scholar and scholarship of roughly half tuition per year for the next 4 years. Join me in congratulating young Thomas Lyons. I hope you two young men are ready for a very fulfilling, rewarding, but challenging and rigorous 4-year journey at Cambridge. And more than that, we are confident, but we also expect that the ways you two have made your school and your school community better at your current school, that over the next 4 years, and even beyond, when you can give back to Cambridge in years ahead, we expect you'll do those same things over the next 4 years to help make Cambridge a better place as well. I commend you both for a good job, and I look forward to this next 4 years with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That is a big deal, and we are honored to be a part of it and honored to inaugurate this program and this new venture. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, one more matter tonight. Many of you know much about what I'm about to say, but it needs to be said often. So allow me just a couple of minutes. For 19 years and 295 alumni, soon to be 322 after May, when we graduate our largest senior class of 27. The Cambridge School of Dallas has sought to exemplify authentic education whereby we feed and form the souls of tomorrow's leaders and contribute genuinely to healthier civic life here in the city of Dallas. During those 19 years, we have achieved notable success by virtually any measure. Whether that success be such as being named as one of the 50 best Christian high schools in America, which we were named just a couple of years ago. Or just recently, in fact, this year, being named one of the top 10 private high schools of all sorts in all of North Texas. Or looking at the multiple, I believe it's 8 now, Naval Academy appointments. One, our first, of course, John Owens, if I'm not mistaken, you were the first, right? And now serving on our board of trustees. He was followed by 7 others and some, yes, Betsy Jackson, some West Point appointments as well. And graduates regularly matriculating to selective universities around the country, et cetera, et cetera. Not to mention the effective and strategic ways many of our alumni are already serving and leading within their communities. Now, amazingly, we have done this while occupying, over these 19 years, it's either 5 or 6 locations. I keep meaning to ask Louis Little, who's been involved with the school since its founding, and I keep forgetting to ask him, is it 5 or is it 6? You can tell me tomorrow. He says 5. Even since the tornado, this is the 5th? Okay, I'll take your word for it. But still, 5. Now that's a lot of movement. That's a lot of, apparently, on the surface, instability. It's a lot of change, right? However, as some of our students made known recently as they were interviewed on Channel 4 News and then also published in Dallas Morning News letter to the editor, there really wasn't that much change. Because the school is not a building. It's not about a building. It's a community, it's a mission, it's a task. So there really wasn't that much change. However, in spite of that reality, the fact of the matter is, it's time for us to have a home. If you read the biblical narrative, yes, Israel wandered in the wilderness for a long time, but there came a time for them to have a home, right? It's time for us to have a home. That is the focus of our current campaign for the generations. We now own our own property. We are almost through the design process for a new campus. And in fact, I would like for you to see what's on the horizon. So I draw your attention to the screen for the next minute and 30 seconds. No music, just imagine it playing, whatever your favorite is.
Wow.
That's the front entrance and the administration building. Entering into the courtyard, library to the back there on the top, science labs below, outdoor science terrace on the left there.
Wow.
Circling around to the right, looking at the dining commons and the arts suite. And then back across the courtyard to the rest of the campus.
Wow.
That's Webb Chapel running from left to right behind the building, and Royal Lane to the right on the other direction. That's the chapel for the future. Webb Chapel side. Royal Lane side. Main entrance. And then overall campus. I can't tell you tonight, but it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to overstate the positive impact to be found by having our own home. Another thing I can't tell you tonight is that there is so much detail built into that campus, designed into that campus, that is all about our mission and who we are. I would love sometime to explain it and show you how all of that is designed into it, so that both explicitly and implicitly, the students, the faculty, visitors, everyone there is keenly aware when they come onto that campus, that's not a typical school. There's something unusual and distinct about it. So it's going to be a campus that has distinction because it's a school that has distinction. I would be honored to show you in more detail all of those things about the new campus. However, presently, I need to remind you of a certain reality. In order to pull this off, we are going to need the help and the support of many friends, many families within the community, and many outside the community. That's simply the reality. If you noted on your program tonight, you have 2 QR codes there. Now, everyone in here under 30 probably knows what a QR code is. The rest of us, we have to learn. But I learned recently. And of course, that QR code with this right here, your phone, will enable you right now, in the next 3 minutes, to make a donation to the Cambridge School of Dallas. We would appreciate that. There are 2 different QR codes because there are 2 different needs. One is our annual fund. We have 30% approximately of our student body need-based financial aid. Folks, that's as high of a percentage as you will find anywhere in Dallas. Well, why don't we do that? Because we're philosophically committed to trying to make it possible for all of those who want this sort of education to have it, even if they cannot be here without assistance. So every year, we face the need to provide that kind of assistance. Help us do that. In addition to that, we were displaced this year, as you know, by the tornado. Now, we're not going to play violin music and, try and tug on your heartstrings right now, but I have a serious question. How many of you have ever been in an accident, like an auto accident, and found that your auto insurance more than covered your losses? That's what I figured. Well, we were hit by a tornado, and we've lost a lot of assets, and our insurance doesn't cover them all. So we need a little help. And then lastly, that QR code there under the capital campaign, if you choose to help us in that way, those funds are strictly designated and reserved for that new campus you just saw. We hope to break ground this summer, June, God willing, July, maybe, and then move in 1 year from that in the fall of 2021. We need your help to make that possible. Now, I understand you may not be prepared to do that tonight. I would respectfully ask that you prayerfully consider doing that, though, in the next few days. One last comment. There is no greater return on investment for our culture than education. And there is no greater educational mission that will give you a great return on investment than that one right there. Not only for your children, but for those to come. So, thank you, thank you, thank you for your consideration in helping us in that way. Again, thank you for coming tonight. John McCaa, thank you again. Really, really, really appreciate it. Again, there may be hors d'oeuvres on your way out. Please help yourself. Beyond that, go in the peace of Christ. Thank you.
I want to thank you. That was one of the most excellent
Oh, thank you.
presentations we've